Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts, Will and Allison and Samantha. So if it looks like we've been crying or laughing till we're crying, it's because we have. This is the third or fourth time we've tried to start this episode, and we just get into laughing fits. And laughter is always fun, right?
That's right.
It raises our vibration. So if it looks like we've been crying, forgive us, because we have.
Yes.
But today we're going to talk about this interesting topic of sovereignty. Sovereignty is a mouthful. We hear it bantered around a lot. Sometimes we really don't know quite what it means, I think.
She looked at me.
And heaven knows we can't spell it. And I'll
No,
look at Will.
definitely can't spell it.
So
It's not sovereignty, why isn't it? Because that sounds...
I don't know how to make that
better.
word up.
Yeah. Well, when you have the ITY, like
Yeah.
it's just, that makes it a
It's
thing, like amity. I don't know.
Sovereignty.
Anyway. Okay.
Excuse me.
All right. So it's
Sovereignty. Now, you brought up something before the show about it feeling kind of oppressive when you would hear that. You had this feeling come up of oppression. Can you talk about that? Because that's interesting to me. I've not heard that before.
I'm going to be honest. I've actually expressed this already several times in our previous cuts where we just couldn't get this out.
Right.
So let's do it this time. And you guys are going to get to hear it this time.
Right.
So sorry, I just had to say it. So for me, especially when you first brought it up, now it's taken away a little bit of its charge because I'm working on it. But when I hear sovereignty, I think of this oppressive kind of feeling. And I do know what it means, but still when I hear sovereignty, and I think the reason why is because it goes, when I think of sovereign, I always go back to these sovereign nations.
Mhm.
We're a sovereign nation. And when you hear that, it sounds very oppressive. It sounds very shut down, closed off. It's not narrow-minded, but it just unto itself. And so, but for some reason that translates as something negative when it's encompassing a whole with a lot of parts in it.
Yep.
As opposed to when you talk about the sovereignty of yourself.
Yeah.
Which that feels light.
Oh, good.
So there's a difference. There's definitely a difference between the two.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because I think you're right. When we talk about a sovereign nation, who knows what the nation means by that? And it can sound a little bit authoritative, I guess, authoritarian.
Mhm.
But we're talking about sovereignty in terms of individuality. What do you think of, Will, when you hear that word?
Honestly, I mean, I've never really given it any thought as far as how it pertains to my existence, my person. I've always associated it, like you said, Samantha, to something as a bigger whole, like a nation or a community, or even this aspect of, the sovereign beings that say that, they don't belong to any one government and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
renegades.
They push back against the the judicial system,
Right,
and
exactly.
don't want to have a driver's license, and they give the police kind of a rough time, right? So
I've
they have a bad connotation. That's sovereign.
and I've never really put myself in a framework of sovereignty. I've never really looked at myself in that aspect. I guess I don't know why. Maybe just I can't give an answer because it's not something that's ever come up into my thought process.
Well,
to be honest
okay,
with you.
and so I have heard it used in spiritual terms, and I'm struggling with that aspect of it. And I know that, well, I guess that's where we're going to go, but I'll just say this, that for me, when someone says, well, you're a sovereign being and stuff, and, and to recognize that within your readings and everything, and how I say it, because, and I think you're from the same school of thought when it comes to doing intuitive work and so forth, that I don't feel the need to surround myself with protection. And, because I already contain it all. I'm already safe, comfortable, whatever. So that idea, again, it's almost got this little bit of a negative thing because I don't need that extra. I'm a rules breaker. I don't need the extra layer of sovereignty. I already know that. It's already a part of my psyche.
That is so interesting. And I think that is why maybe some people do have this little hesitation to explore that, or this resistance to the word.
Yes, resistance.
There you go.
Yeah. So it can feel oppressive. It can feel protective, like we're trying to isolate and protect.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But what I understood about it was simply that we are, and this is a message that's been coming through a lot about standing in your own truth.
Mhm.
And now is the time. And I think the collective just talked about this month. So if you haven't watched that YouTube video, check that out next.
Yeah, that was really good.
About speaking your truth. And now's the time to stand in your truth, find your truth if you don't know
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
and stand in it and speak from it, because the world needs you. They need each of us. We all came here with our own individual purpose, mission, contract, executables is the word they like to use, things that we wanted
Oh,
to
really?
do. Mhm.
Interesting. Got to
Right.
run that program.
Right.
Exactly. And
That's
so,
interesting.
and so my understanding was that's what sovereignty meant, kind of, was to stand in your truth,
Mm.
speak from your place of truth, your sovereign truth of who you are. That was the understanding that I had.
Interesting,
Mm.
because okay, so the way that I've heard it used, where I was talking about in spiritual terms, there's this this mentor I like to follow, who does other galactic kind of stuff too, and he'll do these activations, and when he does these activations, he always talks about your sovereign being,
Mhm.
and that and at the end he always cuts all ties, cords, pulls back anything, and and to recognize your sovereignty. And I'm kind of going, seriously, I'm just like, I don't need to hear all that about the cutting the cords and all that kind of,
Yeah.
because again, I feel unto myself. I don't, it's not that I don't believe in that stuff.
Right.
It's just that
Well,
for
it
me,
doesn't-
it
You
doesn't
already feel-
exist.
It doesn't
Right.
resonate. It doesn't resonate
Yeah.
with your essence, with your being. So yeah, I mean,
so when he talks about it, I'm just kind of going, can we just say, okay, and it's done.
skip,
I don't know.
skip over
something-
that part. Yeah.
But this is so interesting because you're giving a perfect example of you knowing your truth, the truth of who you
I'm
are,
sovereign.
and living it. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, there is
Wow.
something to be said that whenever you engage energetically with anybody, even in a verbal
Yeah.
3D conversation or something, you are exchanging energy because you're an energetic being. And so there is something to
Mhm.
be said about cutting the cords, or at least having this intention of separating that.
Oh, because like you walk away from a conversation that
Right.
it really starts to, it's triggered you, and you're carrying that energy
Yes.
of whatever that person was giving
Yes.
you, and you're not releasing it. But see, to me, I feel them give me that energy, and the whole time I'm going, okay, release,
yours.
move to neutral, release, move to
Oh,
neutral.
good. So you are doing it. You're just not consciously having to go through the process
I'm
of
not
doing
sitting
it.
there going, oh, there's a cord I need to cut,
Right.
something I
Right.
need to unplug from.
Right.
To me, that doesn't, it just does not
Mhm.
resonate.
And really, the only time that I'm
I'm not dissing anyone out there who does that.
No,
by
no.
the
Some people
way.
need
It's-
the visual.
Yeah.
They need this visual, like we teach in Reiki about cutting those cords.
and I was just going to bring that up is the only time that I actually ritualistically cut cords would be through Reiki. Anytime that I give a Reiki session,
Mhm.
that's really the only time I do it because it's part of my practice.
Well, but you really are
Yeah.
sending like energy, like you are delving into someone's
Aura and their energetic
psyche
field.
and all
Sure,
that.
sure.
Yeah. I can see it
Yeah,
there.
but if I'm doing a psychic reading or a mediumship reading and I've got a one-on-one or even a group or even my channelings that I do, there isn't a process that I go through of, okay, well, I've just connected with all these people because I've answered a bunch of questions for them and all this stuff. And I know energetically we're connected. So now I've got to sit and do some sort of ritual to disconnect from that. No.
well, because I feel like you're just kind of, you are in agreement, you're touching upon, you're not rearranging their energy.
Right.
You are not, involved in that process
Right.
with them. You're merely
Yeah.
giving
Well,
them
and the way
information
I look
to
at it is that we've all collectively come together into one consciousness field, one conscious field. So we're all kind of in that mix together. And then when we disconnect, we all disconnect
Yeah,
Good
together.
point. Good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
So
You brought up another idea that's a little bit of a tangent, but I want to reiterate this. And I think we may have touched on it in a previous podcast, but I know the collective has talked about it in our monthly channelings. And that is to bring your energy back from situations and in experiences.
oh, right.
And so this is really critical
really important.
with all of these natural disasters and all of these catastrophes and things that are happening. When you connect with them from the heart center because of compassion, which is normal for a human, because that's who we are,
Mhm.
and you start to give your energy to that situation, or you're praying for the people of that area or whatever, you are energetically sending a piece of yourself
Yep.
there,
Mhm.
and you need to call it back. You need to
Interesting.
remember to call it back. Whatever you sent out there will stay, but you have to call that piece of you back, because we've heard this in client sessions too, that we are scattered in so many because there's so many distractions and different things. And we have a piece of us back at the office in a conversation with somebody, and we have a piece over here in Hawaii because of that. And now in the Middle East and all these places. We don't have enough for ourselves. And ascension requires us to go within, because going within is your ascension. And so you can't do that if you have scattered pieces and you're fragmented everywhere. You need all the energy that you have. So if you feel like you're scattered or you have problems like that, go ahead and sit in meditation, visualize your energy going to Hawaii and bringing that energy back. The good stuff will stay. The love will stay. The compassion stays, but your energy peace comes back. It's kind of like soul retrieval with shaman.
Yeah, I was just thinking
stuff.
Well, and the other interesting thing that's really similar to so as with and I bring this up every once in a while, my ADD personality is like all over the place. And I didn't realize it when I was younger. But like I would walk through a mall, and by the time I'd get to the other side of the mall, I would have all this, like I couldn't look up, my head would hurt.
Wow.
And my mom would just go, "Oh, you're so weak. You're so weak."
Oh my goodness.
And I'd just be like, I don't know. I can't, like
Right.
I'm trying to function. And I was in my early 20s, I think, when I went to a psychic who said, "Oh man, your aura is just hanging out there. You're just picking up on everything." So I was pulling in it was a bottleneck of information coming in.
Yep.
So for me, it's very typical so that I don't lose those pieces. I mean, that energy, like not losing, but that energy snagging, getting caught out there, whatever it is, or sucking in on other people or whatever, is I very consciously pull my energy in until it feels very tight around my body and I feel energized. And it's an interesting thing though, because I can then have compassion and feel, but I don't feel like I'm losing anything of myself. So there's something very, well, like, so, and now I do it automatically. So my son was talking about the other night, he was talking about what's going on in the Middle East, and he's younger and than my husband, and has a very different approach to how he's looking at it.
Sure.
He's looking at different news sources. He's looking at historical records, because he's trying to understand. This is like the first time that it's just been like really kind of heinous in his face and whatever. So they get into this argument, and I'm listening, and he's going, "Well, doesn't it upset you, Mom?" And I'm like, the concept upsets me. What's happening upsets me. If I look at it closely, it's upsetting. And yet I can be compassionate without having to sit here and get riled up and fall into pieces. And I also can hold the idea, oh my God, don't let this piss anyone off, that there's truth on both sides.
Right.
That there's so much truth that, that we don't know all of it. And, us over here, we can't even contain that. So there's also holding that space as well without losing stuff for myself. That is being sovereign.
Yeah, you can be engaged without being, you can be compassionate without being engaged.
Yes.
From the observer standpoint.
Exactly.
And it's something important to do. Learn how to do when you're intuitive. Sorry.
You have to. You really have to, or you'll just lose, especially where we're headed with the chaos that's coming. This is just the beginning. This is really just the beginning of a 9-month cycle that will end, roughly end at the end of June. But
for everything that we are picking up, what we're hearing from other people, cross-referencing.
Right. But this is so fun, the way we do these conversations, because we have a topic and yet we go on tangents, but these tangents are important. And you just brought up another thing, which is good.
We may get back to sovereignty.
And that is this issue with the Middle East. So like I just talked about our last collective channeling, which is up on YouTube, and check that out, because the very first topic, the question that we asked was, what do we need to know about the Middle East? Just give us some advice, because people are upset, rightfully so, right? All right. So they did say to strip away all of the chaos and the pain and all of that junk and get to the root of the truth. So again, truth telling, standing in your truth, speaking your truth, all of that has been such a theme for so long. And in this case also, there is truth on both sides. Both of those countries and those peoples have their own truth, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just that their truth is colliding. And so how can we as individuals and nations, which is where we're going, how can we hold our sovereignty, hold our truth, stand in that truth, and find the common ground? So they talk about that in that channeling. So I would highly recommend that you listen to that channeling, this one that is well, it would have been the October one
Mhm.
because I don't know when this will
Yeah.
air.
Yeah.
Well, and what I was saying with my son in regards to that is that I don't live there. I've not studied that. I've only heard the news interpret it on my behalf. And therefore I don't have a dog in the fight. Like I really don't, I am refraining from holding a position of this or that because, people are being hurt on both sides.
Yeah.
It's like when a football teams, when they go to play each other and you have some that are from religious schools or whatever, they're praying that God backs them. And it's kind of like, well, the other people deserve it just as much. It's like,
God loves them too.
Right.
So
hey, God's wanting them to win too. So,
God really doesn't care who wins.
But I told my son, it's kind of like, you don't have a dog in this fight. And he goes, but this, and this. And I said, but it's not yours, it's theirs. And you need to separate yourself out of it and be an observer and be compassionate.
Right.
And send an equal balanced amount of compassion and love and understanding to, each, not, oh, I'm more for this side or I'm more for this side.
It isn't about taking sides.
No, it's about encircling everything with the same balance of love, compassion, and understanding.
And to have discernment.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to mention what he was telling me about, but they've already come up with falsified video.
Oh, of course.
Doctored video and
Sure.
stuff. So you have to have discernment because there is a disinformation. I don't want to use that word, God, because but there is stuff that is being created to sway us one way or the other. And that's why you have to look at the people who the innocents, the people who are being hurt that, like us, we just go around our day-to-day lives. We want to provide for our families. We want to hold festivities. We want to enjoy life. And the rest of it just, and that's how they feel too.
Right. So I don't want to get on a tangent about the Middle East. It is tragic, of course, but this circles back around to sovereignty because both of those peoples have sovereign understandings of their existence, why they're here, what they're here to do, the life they're to live, right? And so it's about us. And sometimes you may not be able to discern this, like you said, through the news and trying to figure it out with the mind. You need to figure it out with your heart.
Yes.
Sit with it in your heart, and your heart will show you what to do and where the truth lies. And so even in human situations, when you're presenting your sovereign self and you're presenting your sovereign self, and on the 3D, they conflict. Because your contract is different from your contract. And that's what they said about
that's right.
The
That's what they're talking about in the
self.
collective.
And that's so this morning we had a client before we started doing the podcast, and I asked Will if we could sit down and get a brief channeling about what the collective's view of sovereignty is. It's about 14 minutes, so we didn't want to play the whole thing for you, but I took some notes, and I want to tell you what their perspective was. And one of the things that they said, of course, was, and they said this in another channeling, was it the October one? About you can differ on the 3D plane, but you can find common ground. And that's where we're going. As we ascend, it isn't that everybody becomes one and agrees. You still have your individuality. It's just that you can find the common ground, right? And so what they said was,
I have to wait.
Go ahead.
With what you just said, something just downloaded in me, and it was the weirdest thing because I was like, so heaven is not being all, kumbaya, all in one agreement. Heaven is respecting everyone's point of view. Can you imagine how boring it would be? Like what a dull existence it would be if here we up level and everyone's like, yes, I agree with you.
Right.
And it's that growth into respecting one another's sovereignty. Sovereignty. I'll get that. But it was the weirdest thing because I don't sit there. I mean, and the reason why I mention that is because a lot of people see ascension and all this that we're going through as tribulation and, and with all the revelation stuff. I'm not religious, so I'm really bad with that, but they see it as that. And yet heaven is not everything being copacetic, one way, boring. We still have that variety.
We have individuality. And that was so telling when the political events of 2016 happened. because I think it was
happened?
a very I'll let you figure that out later, but it was a very stark.
It's an event that if we talk about it, we make it banned off of YouTube. So we
Oh,
don't talk
okay.
about it.
But it was a stark event that highlighted this idea that I think a lot of spiritual folks think that everybody should agree on certain topics.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like everybody thinks a spiritual person should do yoga, should know about crystals, should be a vegan, all of those stereotypical things. And they think that as you ascend, you're all going to agree that that's right. And that isn't the case.
No.
So anyway,
Yeah.
So again, sovereignty is going back to you holding the truth within yourself.
That's right.
And that's what matters. But with our ascension, it's us respecting one another's differing points of
That's
view.
right.
Yes.
It's, I don't, and this is kind of I wouldn't say it's rhetorical, but it's more of a question to ask yourself, or, has there been a time that you've actually had a conflict with someone verbally, not like angry, spitting at each other, but just where you've been in a disagreement with somebody, a vehement disagreement, and actually took a moment to look at their side or their viewpoint and come to a place of neutrality.
or at least understanding why they formed the opinion that they have
Or
formed,
understand,
right?
right. That's maybe a better way of saying it, because, we are conditioned over time to have our truth and stand there and just scream at the top of our lungs, this is what I believe. I don't care what you say. And you're not going to sway me from what I believe.
It's more important to be right.
It's more important
Yeah,
to be
and
right.
that's not what we're talking about when we
No.
say stand in your truth.
Yeah.
No, standing in your truth is yes, owning your truth, no matter what it is. But it's also understanding that others have their own truth.
Mhm.
And it is to find that middle ground of going, okay, I may not agree with you, but I will try to understand where you're coming from a place of compassion, from a place of love,
Mhm.
and come to an equal understanding that we're not going to agree, but yet we're still going to exist and coexist together.
And the difference is that it comes from your heart, not your head.
That's right.
This is why it's not important to be right
Yes.
in your truth. We're not talking about what you think intellectually and what you believe because of your research. It's about when you sit in your heart space, what resonates with you.
Mhm.
And if everybody is doing that and coming from that heart space, then you will overcome all of those obstacles.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if that truth from the heart is different.
But we have to give equal time. We have to be able to give equal time to that opposition. We have to be able to step into a place of saying, okay, I'm going to be quiet for just a moment to listen to you. Not, and that's the most important thing, is listen.
Well, maybe we need to take this to the house. Jordan
Yeah,
Peterson
right.
even says
Yeah.
that you cannot state your next point until you have reiterated and understood your competitor's point. So
Yeah.
if you and I are arguing,
It's a good point.
I'm not allowed to say something else until I say, okay, if I hear you correctly, here's what you're saying. And if I got it wrong, I got to revamp it and say it again.
That's a
And
good
once
point.
you do that, then we know that we understand each other.
Well,
I-
and
I'm-
that makes sense, because if
Yeah.
you're saying something, let's take Middle East, and you're saying that you have
Yep.
this point of view about it, even if I don't hold that same point
Right.
of view, and I wish my husband and son could have done this the other night. But it's that you're saying something that is important to you. It's
Yes.
of
Right.
value to you. And that's what needs to be respected.
Exactly.
And, like people hate having any kind of political conversation with me because I don't do politics. And so when they bring up, well, rah, 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 one thing or the other, and I'm like, well, on the other side of it, like I can see both sides.
Yeah.
And, some people say, well, that's wishy-washy. And it's like, no, it's that I'm holding both of those as a value, so I can honor both. I was going to say one other thing is, when you were saying, to hold that and say, I hear what you're saying, but this is how I feel. The moment you say but becomes an issue, because people hear the but
Yes.
That's a good
before they
point.
hear anything else. So what
That's a good point.
I've learned this from Diana,
Yeah.
our random person
Yeah, on the
asking
street, yeah.
questions. Yeah. she said to me, all you have to do is just look at the person and say, well, you're not wrong.
Mhm.
And the thing is, when you do that, you have to watch your tone of voice and you have to say it with integrity. Like, well, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because
that's a Southern way of saying but.
it is. It is.
Bless his heart.
Bless his heart.
The Northerners won't get it. No, but it's that way of you're acknowledging, you're not giving resistance to, you're not in denial of that person's point of view. You're releasing from the situation. It's when you don't want to go further into it.
Mhm.
You're kind of at that stalemate.
Yeah.
And instead of just going, yeah, I can't talk to you. Think of like that as just slamming the door in someone's face as
Or
opposed
whatever.
to saying,
Yeah.
you're
It's one
not
of my
wrong.
favorites. Whatever.
Because from your perspective, your
Not wrong.
timeline,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Wow.
I love that. Okay.
Didn't know this was going to devolve into a,
It isn't devolving, it's evolving.
It is,
And
it
that's
is
what-
evolving. You're
That's
right.
what all of our conversations do. They evolve. I have a
love
few
this.
points and
Yeah.
then we just organic. It's great. This is really fun.
I think you've gotten to only your first point, right?
It's okay. We have a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So they explained that our sovereignty is an aspect of our physicality. It exists in the physical, not the energetic. So it's a human construct.
Mhm.
So in other words, there's not an issue about being sovereign when you're an energetic being. But here you have a contract. As a human being, you sign a contract and you have executables. Therefore, your sovereignty is the construct by which you flow along with your contract.
Mm.
So in other words,
Wow.
and I even asked him like, but what about if we defer to our guides a lot and we're listening to them over our own true self? Is that not being sovereign to ourself? And they said no, because even if you and I have the same guide and we ask the same question of that same guide, we
Mhm.
might get a different answer based on our own contract and what we need
Okay, that
as
makes
humans,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
And so even though those two answers are different, and you'll say, well, I heard from Archangel Michael that this is the answer. And you say, I heard from Archangel Michael that this is the answer. And they're different
Mhm.
because we are different people with different contracts.
Yep.
So that was super.
And they got to nudge you in
helpful.
whatever direction is necessary. I think it was Teal Swan.
Mm.
She does little short things, little shorts. And one thing she was talking about one day is, like your guides lie to you, and people are like, what?
Right.
And it's like, well, by omission or by whatever, but they understand the full picture of what your contract is. And it's like that gentle nudge to get you to go one direction or another.
Mhm.
So if they told you what is actually the truth, you would resist and not follow through. But anyway, so it's kind of, it's along those
It's
lines.
a
where
shade
you're-
of gray.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't make it less true because it's coming from two different people. Or it's
Yeah.
the same as I always say, hey, this is what I'm interpreting. If you'd
Yeah.
like to go to another medium, they can talk to that same, soul, and you're going to hear a slightly different message,
Sure.
but neither invalidates the other.
Right.
Okay, I have to
Yeah.
say this caveat. Everybody resonates with different practitioners and different speakers and all of that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of times when we see things on video or YouTube, they sensationalize the heading. And so saying something
True.
like, your guides lie to you.
Yeah, that was a really
huge.
Well, that's a
Right?
marketing getter. So
Correct.
Yeah.
So I would
I
not.
shouldn't have said it quite like that.
Well, I don't think that guides are lying to you. I think that everybody has a different perspective.
That's
based
why
on your
I was
cons-
like more like omission.
Yeah,
It's like they've got to.
Well,
Yeah.
they shaded in a slightly different color than the full blown.
But you're still alluding to, you're still
all of
making it sound like they're deliberately withholding information or not giving. I don't see it that way. I would flip that and say it's just a different perspective and it's
Yeah.
a different truth based on what you need. Like, I don't know.
But
just-
I agree with the fact that I don't think our guides are going to necessarily give you 100% of all of the information that you're asking at
No,
that
and they'll
time.
tell you that.
Yeah.
They've told us that.
Yeah.
They
because
say,
they know when there's going to be resistance.
Right.
well,
or how
we
it's
can't
gonna
handle the 100% of it anyway.
You can't handle the
truth.
And they also tell us it depends on the energy of our questioning. If you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer because they know you're not ready for it because you're not
Yeah.
asking the
Yeah.
question a certain way, right?
yeah.
So it's not about lying. It's about a different perspective or certain information that you're ready for.
Yeah,
Anyway, I
you're
just
not
wanted
ready
to,
for that information. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
I just wanted to clear that up because that's just
Mhm.
my personal viewpoint. I don't think our guides would ever deliberately lie. Okay, so
Yeah.
we know that it's based on a contract, and then the collective said, well, how does that differ from free will? And they said free will is within that contract, that construct of sovereignty. So
Mhm.
you're executing on your sovereign contract
Mhm.
by making choices, and those are your free will
Mhm.
choices. So it doesn't really conflict with free will, the sovereignty.
Okay, little sidebar with free will.
Uh-oh.
Is that before I really started studying all of this, and I'm saying this because I'm sure that there's people out there watching this that that might struggle with the concept, because people are like, well, is it predestined or do we have free will? Which is it? And it's super fascinating, because when I started this whole journey many, many years ago, I was kind of going, okay, well, we have these contracts, so we're kind of locked in, and this is the way it's going to go. And, and I've had that feeling of, this river sweeping me up and just pushing me towards this one conclusion, me just going, I don't want to do this. And having full realization, this is what was going to happen, and so, I felt like, no, I didn't have free will at that time or whatever. But the thing is, the more that you grow into all of this, you realize all the shades. I mean, there's so much free will within all of this that, for you to sit there and go, it's predetermined. No, I mean, you set out these milestones that you want to hit. You've got a contract that, is expressing certain aspects of things. You can go straight there, you can wiggle around, or you can, like I say, opt out, not suicide, but I say opt out, and just say, yep, can't do it anymore. It's just got too much. And so then that shifts everyone else's contract and where they have to fill in. So there's a lot of different things going on there. So nobody needs to feel like they're hand tied,
Right.
because that is not the case. And the more you study it, the more you'll realize it.
And I think we've touched on a lot of that in previous podcasts.
For sure.
We've gotten into free will and determination and all that. I love the way Amanda Lawrence talks about it, because she says eventually your will becomes God's will. So it isn't about you going against God's will, but when you merge and as you ascend and as your physical and your energetic come into agreement, that is your will is to execute on God's will for your life, whether that's which would be your contract, you want to do that. It's not a matter of somebody's making you, it is your desire of your heart.
Yeah.
Well, and you made
because it came from you. Yeah.
You made the choice coming into this lifetime.
Right.
So it was your choice.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Next point.
So we kind of got to all of those. But they did say when we were talking about it's not an energetic concept, it's a human concept. So we did talk about anything that you get from your guides or from multidimensional realms is appropriate, but sometimes it may feel inappropriate because of the timing, because you're just not ready for that piece of information they want to convey to you at that time.
So is that like where you hear something, but your brain, like there's sometimes when the collective is talking and I have to go back, like 3 or 4 times.
Your brain just locks it out.
Yeah. It literally cannot grasp the words. I can read the words, but it literally can't sink in. And there's some other concept that has to get into place
before it deciphers itself.
Yeah. And it could just be that I go back and listen to the other paragraph again, and then I go to that one and then I'm like, now I get, it's, I
think it's even a little more than that. That might be one example, but I think it's also about being resistant to certain things.
Oh yeah, there'd be that.
Like we had a client this morning who was very resistant to a channeled message that she received quite a while ago because of her ego mind, how her ego mind wanted to process it. And she was resistant to it. But it's always appropriate. Or you might get information that at first seems nefarious, or you like, where's that coming from? That doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't feel right. And it might just be timing. But that information is coming into you for a lesson, whatever that is. Well,
I think you can receive that information, because how many times can we say that we received information years and years ago that we didn't know what to do with, but it was just like, it's kind of a little piece of trust. We're telling you this now, you'll remember we told you this, I mean, how many times do we have readings where we're asking for future events? And it isn't until we get into the future that we look back and we're like, oh, they were dropping these little niblets all along the way, and we're just not ready to, it just, I know my perception of what the ascension was like, was to be, which they were not saying specifically. They were giving us an idea, because how do you explain stuff like this to our minds in this
Right.
3D, whatever. But I was somewhat fearful, but then I would relax into it and just go, well, whatever's going to be is going to be. But I still had that, the way my mind was seeing it was like as a child would see it. And now that time has gone by and they've dropped all these references and I've started to coalesce it, I'm like, oh, it's just this. Like it no longer holds this big, it all makes so much more sense. So I think that is that information that comes in, and it's not, it's your own getting it integrated into your system, I guess.
Evolution, your
which
own
is going
evolution.
back
It's your
to
evolution.
sovereignty
It's-
right there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
your evolution. It's growth. It's it's all of it. It's maturity. It's maturing in your in your development of a energetic being, or whatever you want to call it, divine being. And what took place 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago that you don't understand. Now, if you have the chance to go back, I'm sure there's plenty of clarity you can draw out of it and understand why you made the decision you made, why you went down the road you went down, why you contracted with that particular person or that particular decision or whatever it might be. So, it's part of a maturing process, and not everything, even to the point at which you're on your deathbed, you're not everything is going to be revealed to you. Not everything is to be revealed to you in this life, because
It's just not necessary.
Right. And because a lot of that is to be carried over into the next life for that, that lesson.
And according to the 12, not everything is given to you when you die either, because it depends on how far you made it in this life.
Oh man.
You don't just reveal the secrets of it, because if you reincarnate,
You mean I don't get to go down the candy cane slide and get it all,
if you go to the other side and they show you the secrets of everything,
Yeah.
Well, your soul
then it
is-
stays with your soul.
Yeah.
So when you reincarnate again, you have access to that, and you won't. You're not supposed to.
Man, you could get into some really deep conversations with that, like really head spinny kind of.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. So you can read all about that, about the source, beyond
brain
source,
is-
beyond source. The
it's
Venusians
true.
brought that.
Like brink of my mind just going, whew.
All right. So we're not afraid of sovereignty anymore, are we?
No.
Did we
And can we spell it? Do we know how to spell
No.
it?
define it again according to how the collective described it? Because
Let's
you
see.
repositioned
Whether we're
it.
he points to it rather than a string of a
Okay.
definition, but it is a construct that operates within our physicality as a human.
Mhm.
And it is based on our contract. And it has to do with understanding your truth based on your contract and having that as a foundation,
Mhm.
and acting and speaking on that truth from that sovereign place.
I really like that. And yeah, and that is what, because I was just listening to the collective's message from last week today, and that is what they were talking about. It was
Interesting.
like,
It's fun how this ties.
it always works together where I'm
Yeah.
listening to stuff that applies to directly, even though I have no idea coming up here a lot of times what we're going to talk about.
Right.
And yet whatever I listen to absolutely
Is
ties
relevant
in.
for what we're going to be talking about.
And as an aside, the first example that they gave, which I thought was very interesting, is somebody doing nefarious things that you would not agree with, that you think are bad. They're causing chaos and disruption, which we see a lot of.
Oh, but that's there.
Their sovereign construct based on their contract. That's what they came in to do. Because remember, we live in a polarized world on purpose. We
Yeah.
learn just as much from, or probably more from, the negative things that impact us
That's right.
as we do from the positive. Because if we wanted all positive, we wouldn't have come into this. We had it all already.
Somebody has to agree to be the bad guy.
Correct.
Which is why when you look at what's going on in the Middle East, there are things being learned, discovered, and that really was an interesting overview of how the collective explained all of that, that there's so much being revealed, but it's going to be revealed and like understood at a much more rapid rate
Pace.
than what would have normally occurred because of a war.
Yeah.
And I just
Mhm.
find that I'm like, I can't wait.
Mhm.
Not that I'm excited about what they're going
No,
through.
but it's
I
what's
want
going to be
that
revealed.
healing.
Yeah.
I want that
what lies on
healing
the
to
other
occur.
side of all
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this topic. This was really fun.
This is fun.
And as always, very informative. Hope you found it as informative, and give us some comments about what you think or what you thought sovereignty was prior to this, or if you have something to expound upon.
Yeah.
And always hit the notification bell so you see when these come out. Like it, share away. We
Yes,
love that.
please.
And thanks again for those who have been commenting, because we read them and really they're very heartwarming. And we appreciated the one from last week about it's last week. I don't know when this will air. It was about the origin story part 2. Some of you guys gave us some really beautiful comments, and
Yep.
we're so happy that we can speak to
Yeah.
some of you, and that it's meaningful conversation for you. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
So until next time.
Yep.
Bye.